Hello, Eric. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Right, it's a pleasure, I hope.
I hope too. Yeah. So, um, so Eric, let's start then. I start these interviews with asking you about your journey into Quakers. So I wonder if you want to tell us the story of how you became a Quaker. What were you seeking, and what did you find?
Hmm. Yeah, I've always been more of a political animal rather than religious. Um, as a child, um, I chose which denomination to go to Sunday school based on where their summer excursion would be. And uh, so I was always political right from about the age of 12. I remember my first political experience was sitting on a in 1937, sitting on a co-op lorry in the May Day procession in Nottingham, holding a bucket collecting pennies for the Milk for Spain campaign. By coincidence, my wife's mother and aunt at the same time, in fact, were working in Spain to do with work for the Spanish government, which was rather a coincidence. And I say I've been through several political parties, moving ever further to the right, although I'm never likely to reach reform. And in fact, my the first contact, first thing I noticed when the word Quaker came into my mind was, and at that time I was a member of the Communist Party in Nottingham, and we always had our daily work at Christmas Bazaar in the Nottingham Quaker Meeting House, which was very convenient at that time, right in the centre of Nottingham. Um, Not that I paid any attention, I didn't take any interest in what were Quakers, just knew that they were very friendly and helpful. Um, next contact with Quakers was a rather unpleasant one, actually. Uh, Liddy and I, after some CND demonstration, a couple of days afterwards, uh, offered to go and collect all the posters and banners that had been deposited at friend's house in Euston Road, as we had a van. And we went to collect them and were very unpleasantly told off by the warden there at the time. Most grumpy chap. Um, but because I was always mixed up with films, and we had started making some short films to do with Ban the Bomb. And at that time, um, within Quakers, there was a branch called the Friends Peace Committee. Um, Francis Jude was the secretary of the committee, and that was his work on peace activities. And they had started organizing um, showings of films related to peace in the big meeting house, um, as it were, a trade show mainly for teachers and big audiences, about 600 people would come to these. And we got connection with the friends through two things. A, because we were making some films or buying films in which were suitable to be included in the program. And because my technical work at that time was providing film projection equipment to various companies and audio visual things, in fact, they engaged me to do the projection in the big hall. So that's how we got to know Quakers much more. We didn't meet the grumpy caretaker, but we met much more pleasant-minded people. And so we started going to what was Islington meeting, which only had four people. There was only four members, one of whom named Joyce Brogden, very quiet, was one of the first people to be sent to prison for obstructing warlike activities. But of course, that meeting house has been demolished, and there is in fact a petrol station where it stood in just off Camden Road. And we also went to Muswell Hill meeting a bit. So uh, my wife's mother had a cottage at Ipswich, this house where I am now, and which was empty. She didn't use it very much, and she said, we could have it if we wanted it. And I remember we came here one February, and it was a glorious weekend. And Lydia said, "What's a pity we can't move and live here." So I said, "Well, maybe we can. Let's plan." So 18 months later, we moved from London to live in Ipswich, and we started going to Ipswich meeting, and after that would have been in 1965 that we started going to Ipswich meeting, or 1996. We moved in 1965, June. Um, so that was really what brought us. Now, why did we join Quakers? I I think it was mainly that I needed a spiritual home. Having been from the age of about 14 in the Young Communist League, and then in the Communist Party, which I left in 1957, um, as a result of the execution of Imre Nagy in Hungary. And I had lost faith in the Communist Party leadership. Um, After a while, this is while we were still in London, after a while I joined North Islington Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't a member at that time. Actually, by coincidence, we lived in Corbyn Street. Not named. I've often wondered, are they likely to change the name to Jeremy Corbyn Street? um, but I only joined that really to try to help to get rid of what I consider a very unsuitable defence secretary in the Labour Party. And I was still in the Labour Party when we moved to Ipswich. But after attending one or two of our local meetings, of which they only seemed interested in what sort of street lighting we should be having, I decided the Labour Party really wasn't suitable for me, and I left. And because as a result of making the peace films, um, we started to have a library of films which we lent out, and um, we bought. At first, we made one or two newsreels, but then I went to the London Film Festival and saw this film by Norman McLaren, a Scotsman who worked for the National Film Board of Canada. And he made a very famous kind of animated film called Neighbours, in which two neighbours. Have you ever seen this film, Neighbours? It's an animation. There's two neighbours sitting symmetrically side by side, very good neighbours, but then a dandelion or some very common flower grows up exactly halfway between them, and each of them wants to gain control of it, and eventually it winds up with them killing each other. Very effective piece film about squabbling over nothing. Um, and then we found one or two films, um, other piece films, and decided that we'd try and build up a library. So this has gone on for a couple of years. And then I was approached by um, Leslie Leslie Kirkley, a Quaker from Oxford, who was the secretary of what was still called Oxford Committee for Famine Relief. And also, at the same time, oh, I've forgotten his name. Anyway, the man who had started War on One, they both wanted to have a talk to me. So we met at Crank's. Crank's vegetarian restaurant in Good Street doesn't exist now. It was the only vegetarian restaurant at that time.
Mm.
And they said, uh, we're both starting to make or buy films to propagate why we exist. Why don't you widen what we were called the Nuclear Disarmament Newsreel Committee? Why don't you broaden this as well as having films about things you're opposed to, have films about things which you are in sympathy with? So we changed the name, which eventually became Concord, i.e., we chose Concord because it means harmony and working together. That's how. So, and we were running that, and this coincided with Labour government at the time started what was called liberal education in schools. The idea that schools should be teaching about citizenship as well as scientific and art subjects. So, and we'd started to get films from television. Um, at that time, there was a series of on what was Associated Rediffusion at the time. They had every Thursday a very young Jonathan Dimbleby presented a current affairs program. Some of these were quite suitable, so we approached them and they said, yes, you can have them. We don't want any money for them, but you'll have to pay to have the copies made. Um, so it developed quite a lot. And up here, I'm somehow talking about something that doesn't quite relate to Quakers, but it might be interesting. We applied to become a charity, and the Charity Commission said, your work doesn't qualify under our regulations. You should approach the Department of Education and Science, their charity department, which we did. And they turned us down, saying, as your films haven't been made for education, therefore you can't be an educational charity. Well, by that time, our films were being used by lots of teacher training colleges. So we got letters from about 60 of them saying, although the films weren't specifically made for education, they are of great educational value. So please register them as an educational charity, which they did, and that's what we still are. So, and we formed a committee of trustees who were all Quakers. Our chairman at the time was Rex Phillips, a member of Orpington meeting, very interested in the idea of using film, and Peter James in Ipswich, who was, in fact, was head of a department at BT, who had just moved their research department and built an enormous building just outside Ipswich. And so, so there having been all these political parties and left them all in disgust. Green Party hadn't started at that time. Um, and when we sort of mixing with Quakers, I felt at home. So that's really
Yeah.
how I came to
So
be.
you felt at home politically more than religiously then, by the sounds of it. But I mean, how did you, that must have spent, involved a lot of time spent in silence and and prayer and a very perhaps Christian style of worship in those days.
Yeah. Yes, yes, I felt much more attuned to that.
So what was it like then? You said that you weren't particularly religious. What, why did you stay? What did you get out of Quaker meetings?
Oh, a sense of togetherness more than anything. Um, it's always been a rather quiet meeting. It was until just recently, never a university town, so we didn't get university students coming along to wake us up.
Mm. So do you call yourself a Christian? Are you Christian in your own views?
People ask me that. I say I try to follow the teachings of Jesus. I
Mm,
don't. I don't accept anything supernatural.
mm,
I mean, when I've got one or two correspondents, and when they use the word God and talk about a personal God, I say I just can't imagine. I mean, when you think of the universe and the ever expanding knowledge about the universe and millions of stars, which are suns, of course, the idea that there's something who have a personal relationship with me, I just find that incomprehensible.
mm. And has that changed at all? I mean, obviously you have a long view on Quakers in terms of having seen how Quakers have developed over the last however many years, many decades you've been involved. Do you think that the religious underpinnings of Quakers has changed?
The what of Quakers has changed?
Yeah, the religious approach, if you like, of Quakers, has it changed?
Yes, I mean, it's much less Bible based than it used to be. I mean, I would say probably of our meeting at Ipswich, which is quite small now, average attendance is about 18 to 20. I think probably most are non-theists.
Mm, mm. So is that how you describe yourself then? Do you,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, yes. People say I'm a Christian, and I say I try to follow the teachings of Jesus,
Mm,
but I don't believe in the virgin birth.
no. So what does that mean then? Can you give us a sense of what does that mean in your daily or weekly life following the teachings of Jesus?
Well, hmm, well, I don't really know how to describe that. I just try to do things which aren't harmful. I try to live a sustainable life as much as possible.
Mm,
The funny thing that you try to do something and then you read somewhere there's a harmful side effect. I to cut down on use of electricity, I have a wood burning stove because we live in the middle of a wood. We've got plenty of wood. But then I read, well, stoves contribute CO2. And both the question is, do they contribute
mm.
less than electricity? And
So in terms of the testimonies then of Quakers, it sounds as if um, peace matters to you a lot
yeah,
and sustainability. That's what I'm picking up from what you've said matters to you. Let's talk about peace first then. I mean, what is it about Quakers that helps you develop an approach to peace?
oh really. What is it about Quakers that help? Well, I don't know. It's just the way of life.
Hmm.
And I must say, I'm not very happy about the way things are going in British yearly meeting.
Right.
No.
What do you mean?
Well, actually, I put it to one side here in case it came up. This was an article that was in The Friend, August 2019, by Rex Ambler,
Hmm.
in which he says, he's seen our traditional decision-making process being slowly eroded, and I have been puzzled and dismayed by it. And I think it's been that our traditional way of working is being eroded, and there's too much centralization and decisions made not by the membership but by small groups who've taken control centrally.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I've had similar worries, but I don't know how. I mean, what is happening then? When you say a small group centrally, I mean, what do you mean by that?
Uh, uh, well, for instance, um, electronically, there's um, a, a Quaker discussion group forum, as it were, called Quaker Spaces.
Mm, mm,
But this is very much controlled and censored by people in Friend's house.
yeah.
And for instance, I mean, a classic example, somebody, when it happened to be the 300th birthday of Elizabeth Fry, sent in a contribution. It was censored, refused to be published because it talked about her work to have special places in prison for women where men were not allowed. That was considered to be transphobic, so it was not allowed to be for the rest of us to see it. You know
So,
that, and some of these censors are not Quakers; they are staff at Friend's house. And another thing that has irritated me, in fact, both my wife and I, we haven't any dependents, so our legacy was going to go to British Yearly Meeting. We've
mm.
come out completely. We're leaving it to Medicine Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders,
Oh, yes, yes.
because they are doing things, and we think Quakers aren't doing things the way they used to. But what was it I was just going to say? I've just lost my track.
Mm,
Uh, there was something just recently. Oh, I know. Um, this is before we decided to um, alter our wills. About a year ago, we were all all members were invited to take part in a discussion about changing the structure of Friends. Um, and I, I said, well, sounds good. But if you're going to alter the structure of the way Friends' House is run, I'd like to know, uh, can I have a list? I don't want to know the names of people,
mm,
but I'd like a list of the jobs that are done at Friends' House,
mm.
roles that are filled. And the reply I got back, which staggered me, was, we haven't any means of collecting that information. And I thought, my God, I mean, Concord is a charity. We grew and eventually we had about 30 staff. Well, I, as the equivalent of the CEO, equivalent, which is Paul Parker, I suppose, and friends,
Mm.
I knew what each role was.
Yes.
Considered it's necessary. Somebody ought to have an overall picture. I felt that was, they didn't want to disclose.
Mm.
They didn't want to tell me what 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 is done at Friend's house. And um,
Gosh, I mean, that's a very interesting question to ask, Eric. I mean, it's a very specific question that you would think would be quite a straightforward question to answer. I think it's a very good question.
I mean, pretty, and I took this off the website. Trying to put a light on it because I also questioned well,
All
uh,
right. A flow
but
chart, is it?
yeah, that's a chart showing some of the jobs,
Oh, the
and
hierarchy.
and there's so many governance manager, team lead, governance manager, trustees and meetings for sufferings, governance and projects coordinator, two of those. There's so many of these jobs to do with. And then, as well as a governance manager, team lead, there's a head of governance, and there's a church governance advisor. And I thought, we're, we're, uh, can't get out of the way. All these people, I'll guard your back whilst you guard mine, it seemed to me.
Hmm.
It seems to have gone crazy. That was partly why I wanted to know how many people are employed at Prince House and what do they do?
Hmm.
And they said, we haven't any means of collecting that information. I think that's rubbish. It's just,
That is astonishing. I mean, I think it's a very good question. I have been asking similar questions myself, really, but I haven't thought to ask that specific question. I might take that up my question myself. Um, and of course, it's interesting you talk about then not all Quakers themselves. I mean, some of them are not even, they're not Christian or not religious people. That's not seen as important. They recruit on the basis of Quaker values, whatever that might
uh,
mean.
I don't like these advertisements that appear constantly. You could leave the word Quaker out and they apply to any business organization. There's some, of course, actually, I fell out a bit many years ago when they followed the trend of business and started and did away with the personnel department,
Mm, mm.
deals with persons, substituted human resources. I hate that term.
Yeah, yeah,
People are more than a resource.
yeah, yeah.
This trying to, because they use the term woke nowadays to describe it, wouldn't they? Trying to keep in the latest fashion.
So it's really interesting what you're saying. So you've rewritten your wills so that you were going to leave money to Britain Yearly Meeting, and you've decided not to. And from what I can hear you saying, the reasons are there's a lot of staff, and a lot of them are doing jobs that you don't know what they are, and you can't even find out because they won't tell you what those roles are. I mean, it does concern me as well, if I'm honest. And I do. I've been on some of the central committees, the Quaker Life Central Committee. And when I got there, I thought, oh, great, I'll be able to see what really goes on and have some level of insight and, some small modicum of influence over it and how these discussions move forward. And I must admit, I'm not at all convinced that the oversight works in quite the way that friends think.
Uh,
Um,
we've got
because if
a member of our meeting, also on the Quaker Life Committee.
mm,
He says exactly the same as you.
mm,
Finds it a frustrating role.
it is, I did find it frustrating, and I do think there's an issue here about the work program of friend's house or Quaker life in particular, perhaps that's where the bulk of the staff are. This work program is set in place, years in advance, it seems. And it's really quite an unmovable, one of that metaphor of the oil tanker. It's very difficult to change direction. And in any case, really any discussions around what in it is very secretive, really. It's a very strange process. Now, you mentioned Quaker Space on Facebook. I'm banned from that, Eric. I've been chucked off that for having the wrong opinions.
So it's chucked off what?
The Quaker
You said
Space.
Quaker space,
I've
Quaker
been
space.
chucked off. Yeah, the Facebook discussion group. I've been expelled from that
Oh,
myself.
wait a minute. Is Quaker space a Facebook thing?
Yeah, it's a discussion group
No,
run
but
by
it, but
the
is it
staff.
but is it on Facebook
Yeah.
that it works? Uh-huh.
But I'm
Yeah.
expelled from it because I've got the wrong opinions.
And well, who expelled you? Who has the authority to expel you from it?
Who knows? The moderators of the Facebook page. I think it's all being managed by the senior staff, and I think Paul Parker as being in charge is in oversight of the rules and the regulations of how they run the moderation. Um, But yes, I certainly don't see it. So I don't remember what you just talked about in terms of Elizabeth Fry. Isn't it fascinating that somebody like Elizabeth Fry, who is so well respected outside of Quakers, has suddenly become a person that we don't talk about anymore because she upholds single-sex spaces.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
astonishing.
And then perhaps Joseph, Joseph, got his other name, the editor of The Friend,
Oh, yes.
perhaps he puts them in to provoke. But I noticed, perhaps it was the week before last, there was a comment there saying uh, about this Quakerology that it had got transphobic messages in it, and so I just scrolled down. I got at the moment there are about 48 items you've done. I
Yes.
count
Yes.
that,
The videos. Yeah.
and I briefly looked at the description for each one. The only one I could see which would contain a hypersensitive person would say is transphobic, and that's the one from Heather
Mm,
Brunskill. Whether any of the others have it or not, I don't know. Any comments? But this person who wrote said, they singled out this one Quaker, one item,
I know.
and
I
I
mean, it's
don't know whether
interesting.
I haven't.
It's interesting to me that the one issue of one video has become so big. And of course, every time there's a letter in the friend about it, then people go on and watch the video. So
Yeah,
every time they mention it, they draw
I,
attention to it.
actually, have you got any means of um, noting how many views a particular one has?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
did
Um,
you notice if after that thing in the friend, did Heather Brunskill's numbers go up?
it's been watched about 100 times.
I
And
haven't looked at it yet.
it goes, people go back and um obviously you can go back and watch whichever video. So I think anytime it's mentioned, then it's going to raise awareness of it, isn't it? It's one person's perspective on the book that she wrote and her experience that she felt that she was cancelled, really. And it's one
But,
person's story, Eric. It's the
but
same.
that's another thing that has irritated us. The way the bookshop is censoring what they will sell.
Hmm.
They wouldn't have a book because it would be unsafe for the staff. What sort of staff are we employing that a few words like that would upset them? Make them unsafe, make them uncomfortable, yes,
Yeah.
perhaps. But that's not the same as unsafe.
No, indeed. I mean, I think they make out that unsafe is the same as uncomfortable, and it's a shocker, really. It really is. It really is. Did you I mean, you talked about your peace activism, if you like. Are you of an age where you did national service, or were you involved in the war at all?
I was a volunteer. Volunteer. I joined the army when I was just coming up to 18. I'd wanted to join the Navy and go to sea, but my eyesight forbade me doing that.
Mm.
However, I still went to sea, even though I was in the army, because I joined a volunteer only unit, which served on cargo ships
Mm.
as gunners. Uh, you could say I was a peaceful person because the name of the organization was called Defensively Equipped Merchant Shipping, i.e., we weren't aggressive.
No.
We were only defending ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. What do you make of the recent world affairs then, now that we're all looking at an America that's changing its approach and forcing us to rethink our approach to defense?
Who would have thought that we would have reached this stage? Not just with Trump and so on, but with uh, Cat. It wants to. He's reminding me it's time. It's feeding time. You've got to wait a bit. Um, I mean, it's depressing, the whole situation, world and here. I mean, the Labour Party I regard as the Tory Tory light party. Um, but uh, yeah, I just don't know what to think about Ukraine. I never considered myself 100% pacifist. I wouldn't join the PPU, although I was asked if I'd join, but I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah. No, well, it's making me think at the moment about, there's a lot of support for Ukraine and the defense of Ukraine, and I just wonder what that means for us in the UK building up our troops again, and what views
It
on
was
that
not,
will be.
I've always thought it was never a black and white issue. I've read a lot um, about the history of Ukraine, and of course, and I've been there, had an interesting experience. Went there and went to a wedding, Ukrainian wedding, once. But Ukraine was never an independent country. Large Ukrainian language, ethnic grouping, but never an independent country until 1922, when of course, what was the Bolshevik Revolution, um, set up when they set up all these autonomous republics. They created the Ukrainian Autonomous Socialist Republic, and and this is the basic cause of today's situation. They included within it some Russian ethnic areas, the Donbass, that region, the basin of the River Don, um, Donetsk, um, was always Russian, not Ukrainian, but they put it in Ukraine. And of course, as happens when an ethnic group which have never had their own country, as it were, gets it, it becomes very nationalistic and quite aggressive, as happened with Poland when it was reconstituted, and they fought a lot with Ukrainians. Um, and uh, and I mean, recently the Russian minority in what is now Ukraine had a certain amount of discrimination against it. If the Ukrainian government had been prepared to give them more autonomy, I think Putin could never have any grounds. And of course, what I've always said that, the reason Putin is so supported by the Russians is because the West didn't help when it allowed, when it in effect it betrayed the promise it had made to Gorbachev that NATO would not expand eastwards. And that's what they did. And they said, well, these countries asked to join. Well, I'm sure they would, but they didn't have to accept them. And so there's a slight justification for Putin's actions, even though I don't consider them acceptable.
And what do you make then of these pronouncements that we make as Quakers? Because, we just talked about central offices, if you like, making announcements. And they make announcements about all sorts of war situations and political situations. Do you feel that they take the right approach?
Yeah, yes, I tend to agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah. And sustainability is obviously important to you, Eric, because you mentioned the Green Party just now.
yeah, yes, of course. Um, I mean, we started at Concord Films. Originally, it was called Concord Films Council. Oh, after well, it was Nuclear Disarmament Newsreel Committee. Then we wanted to change it to Concord Film Council, but we found out just a few weeks earlier, the Lutheran Film Service had changed its name to Concordia. So we thought, well, no, we can't really go have a Concord and a Concordia. They'll get too mixed up. But
Mm.
so we called ourselves Harmony Films for a while. But then the secretary of Concordia, he contacted me and said, we've decided we're going to close down, so feel free to go ahead and call yourselves Concord, which we did. We called ourselves Concord Film Council, and then changed it to Concord Video and Film Council when video came in.
Mm, mm.
But then when DVDs came in, we thought we can't go on. We'll just change it to Concord Media.
Yeah, yeah.
So as it were, we have a trading name, Concord Media. But we had our first films to do with ecology in 1973. We started having films about what's going wrong with the planet, pollution, and so on from
Mm,
1973. So we pioneered quite a lot. Same as we pioneered really the fair trade movement because we started getting films from Granada Television, who were always the best commercial company for documentaries. That's because the company, in fact, was owned by two socialists, possibly even undercover communists, Cecil Bernstein and his brother. And anyway, they used to put out every Monday a what called World in Action. And one they had was called The Cost of a Cup of Tea, about conditions on tea plantations, how terrible it was. And we took that and put that into distribution. And then a few months later, they put out the more called Further News on Tea Plantations, showing that the situation wasn't improving. And that helped to kickstart the fair trade movement.
mm.
And we had films about race relations. Have you ever heard of Jane Elliott, Andy?
Um,
Blue-eyed, brown-eyed.
oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. She just this American teacher decided to teach the children discrimination. This was in an all-white school, so she told them one day that the blue-eyed children were, in fact, she found were cleverer than the brown-eyed children. So, in order to get the best exam results for the school, which will help us all, um, we need to prioritize things for the blue-eyed children. But so I'll know which are the blue-eyed children. The brown-eyed children, you have to wear these collars. So she produced some collars, and they were
Yeah.
but the next day she came in and she said, "Oh, I made a mistake. It was the brown-eyed children who were the cleverest. So they've got to wear the blue-eyed children have got to wear the collars." And we had that film, and then 16 years later, um, uh, CBS, American News Channel, they invited the original class of children and showed them bits of the original film and asked them to discuss it. And also in it, and the same situations was done in a prison with the prison warders having to wear the collars and be discriminated against. And so we had those. We sold hundreds of copies of these films.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a very powerful story. I mean, I have heard of that. I haven't seen the original film probably, but it's a very famous story. Probably made famous by the film. Yeah. So you're, in terms coming back to the Green politics, then you're no longer part of the Green Party. You don't think that's
I'm a suspended member on two grounds. Um, first of all, you have to understand there's a battle for control of the Green Party. The way its constitution is, it's never changed since it was very small. So it's very easy for a determined small group. By small, I mean a couple of hundred people to take control of the main committees, which has been done by people who support the main what I consider trans extremist policies of, self-ID. As if a man says I'm a woman, then
mm,
you've got to treat them in all respects as a woman. Incidentally, uh, we've got films on nearly all subjects. In fact, we released a film in about 1980, a film about uh, two or four, forgotten which, genuine, what I call genuine trans people. I accept there are. And this is a very sympathetic picture of the struggles that they had in those days. So I'm not transphobic, but I'm accused of so there's two grounds on which I was suspended. One, that I was prepared to reveal the names of the people making suspensions.
mm,
That's confidential.
mm,
And the second is that I had made some transphobic statements. Um, in my, you could, these things, suspensions come up for review every quarter. And I made a mitigation statement that I promised not to reveal any names. I never did, in fact, reveal any, or well, I'd said I would, so I agreed that I wouldn't. And but I said, but I dispute that any of my statements are transphobic. Can you please give me a sample and explain to me in which way it's transphobic? And I've never had a reply for that.
so what's this got to do with green politics?
It's
Why
because
why is it so it's doesn't seem to be much to me anyway to be about safeguard sustainability of the planet.
I know, but it seems to me that it's almost a sort of mass hysteria that's
Mm.
gripped a certain group. You can't say a single thing which, I mean, to my mind, there's some people. We had a friend, well, an acquaintance. She never had any friends. And the reason she didn't have friends was because she was so sensitive. Almost anything anybody would have said to her, she would take it as a rebuke.
Mm. Mm.
Some people they see
Mm.
that nobody else does, and some of these trans people, and it's not trans. It, usually, they're not themselves trans people, but they support the idea that trans people can be whatever they want to be. Um, and this sort of group have got control. There's, within the Green Party, there are various demographic groupings. There's a Green Party women section, a Green Party seniors. There's a what we now tend to call the alphabet group. L, because there's so many letters, it keeps growing. LBTQ plus alphabet group. There's that group, and there's the young Greens, and of course, young people tend to be a bit over the top, aren't we? Sometimes it's necessary, I think, to have some people a bit over the top, but the way it was set up to encourage young people to join, the young Greens sector have their own infrastructure within they're almost a party within a party, and so they organize. Uh, that's how this small group are able to keep control of the Green Party. And it's building up to a crisis because um, your average Green Party member is only interested in their local party and getting people elected, and they don't really know what's going on at the top.
Mm.
Although more and more are now, um, and but and so the struggle for control is intensifying. And just only today's Tuesday, on Sunday, I read that the top body, a five-person group called the Standing Orders Committee, which in fact polices what happens, and because there's five of them, there tends to be a struggle for control. Three of the five, the three I consider the sensible people, are all being suspended. And you can be suspended very easily, you see, in the Green Party. Someone puts in a complaint, and the complaint about them was that they'd acted unconstitutionally. Now, the complaint first goes to a referral committee who decide whether it's serious or not, whether they should pass it on to the disciplinary committee. But both these two committees are in the hands of the people, the same people who sent in the complaint. So,
So let's bring this back to Quakers then. What do
yeah.
Quakers make of all of this? Because you've obviously got, strong views on things. How do you get on with Quakers at the moment?
Oh, very well. Locally, yes, I don't really know any nationally Quakers, but no, I don't have any problems locally at all.
Because it seems very strange. I mean, I don't know anything to do with the Green Party, but it seems to me that you know, Quakers are quite easy to get along with in our small local meetings, but when we get together in bigger groups, then perhaps the tensions arise. That's perhaps just
Well,
normal.
well, actually, um, when they had within the Green Party, um, one of the three top committees is called the Regional Council, the country is divided into 10 regions, and each region can send two delegates to this committee, which has considerable powers. It appoints the disciplinary committee, and this has been in the hands of the nonsensical group up till now. But at the last election for my region, the Eastern region, in fact, two sensible people were elected, one of whom is a Quaker, Leslie Graham from Norwich, somewhere in Norfolk, Quaker means. Uh, chat with her a bit. So there are quite a few Quakers involved,
Mm. Mm.
usually struggling like I am to get it. You see, in its constitution, it says the Green Party believes that trans women are women. That's to say, men calling themselves women are women. It's within the constitution, uh, and a lot of other rubbish, in my opinion. So there's a few Quakers involved. You know.
Yeah. So what do you hope for, or what do you think about the future of Quakers then? Do you think we'll stay around?
A bit depressing, really.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Depressing in what way?
Uh, well, we see, we've appointed these development workers,
Mm.
which I have a call with there, because originally there was what was a pilot project called Stop It Cat, called um, Vibrancy. There was a vibrancy project set up, and it produced a report, a very positive report, which I was very critical of. It's all a lot of hot air. It's got no facts in it. It's
Mm.
opinion. But based on that, they decided to set up having local development people.
Mm.
And and when I read the role description, I wasn't very happy with it. It's if you looked at the last advertisement, the final item that it put in the as part of the role was outreach, whereas I felt it ought to be the first item. It was too
Mm.
much concerned with internal matters, and I mean, we've had local development workers now for about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. Doesn't seem to have made any difference. Membership is still falling. So I said um, I worked it out with the total cost in wages of it, leaving aside the cost at friend's house of the people being involved in overseeing the local workers. But I worked it out it, that for our local meeting, our share, if that money that's been spent on local development workers had been given to our local meeting to spend on outreach, I think we could have done a better job.
Mm. Yeah, it's very tricky, isn't it? Because there's a lot of money goes on these things and not that much inspiration, I think.
Not much value for money.
Mm. Yeah. So when you say it's a bit depressing then, I mean, what do you think? Do you think Quakers will be around in another 100 years?
Oh, there'll be some. Yes, I don't think it will die out. There'll always be some, but
Mm.
I can't see I can't see improving in the next 5 years. I can't see what. what could happen
Mm.
to improve it.
You see, my view, it has to be religious rather than political,
Yeah.
which perhaps doesn't speak to you. I don't know, but it seems to me that we have to go back to being, fundamentally a spiritual practice and a spiritual community.
Well, far as Ipswich is concerned, that's what we are. We don't do very much outside. We we hire. We've got our own meeting house, and we hire out premises to, to a lot of organisations. We provide a
Mm.
materialistic function apart from it being our own place to worship. We've got a nice library, but the membership doesn't grow. But we don't do much advertising outside. Say, if we had a budget for advertising outside, we might do better. We did
Mm.
more.
Mm. Well, let's wait and see what happens then, Eric. It's been
Yeah,
lovely talking to you. I'm sorry
yeah,
we can't end on a more optimistic note about Quakers for the future.
I know. The charismatic churches are doing very well, but for
Yeah.
us, that's mainly people go there partly because it's theatre,
Mm.
partly for spiritual
Yeah.
sustenance. Um, Quakers appeals to a very small.
Mm. Do you still enjoy going to meeting?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah, yes.
Why do you still enjoy it? What do you get from it?
Nice to see other people there. Sit there quietly, look at everybody, wonder what everybody's thinking.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for talking to me, Erica. Eric, it's
Okay,
been lovely to speak with you.
all right, I'll go and feed that cat now.
Yeah.
All right, bye bye.